listening to Throw the Podcast, brought to you by ThrowTheX.com, the very best in mediocre wrestling journalism. And now, your hosts, Jay Gunter and Ben Conrad.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Throw the Podcast's SmackDown review. I am your host, Jay Gunter, and, before we dive into this week's SmackDown, just want to take a second. The wrestling community lost a pretty big figure a couple days ago, and that was when Mean Gene Okerlund passed away. Mean Gene, he was a staple of late 80s, early 90s wrestling. If you were a fan like me growing up, then it wouldn't take you very long to actually think of a moment back then that Mean Gene just made better, whether it be, his Hulk Hogan interviews, things of that nature. I was lucky enough to meet him. I met him in Orlando during the WrestleMania down there, and just seemed like a great guy. Didn't get to spend a lot of time with him, but he's definitely going to be missed by the wrestling community and by myself personally. So, moving on, SmackDown this week was taped. It, of course, fell on New Year's Day. Hopefully, you could have read the spoilers. One thing I noticed, and if you listen to Ben Conrad's Raw review, he brought this up, that reading the spoilers and then actually watching the product, reading the spoilers, it's easy to come away from that and say, oh, this isn't going to be a very good SmackDown, because you see who wins, and sometimes it gives you, a little excerpt of what happened. Watching it is a completely different story, and I think that this SmackDown was a great example. So a couple of weeks ago, the McMahons came out and said, basically, hey, we're sorry for giving you crap. We're sorry for giving you a garbage product, and we're going to listen to you, and things are going to change. And if you listen to me and Ben on Throw the Podcast on the actual flagship show, we talked about it, and we said, man, I wonder if it is actually going to change. Ben said Ben didn't think so. Ben said he had no faith that the actual product was actually going to change for the better. I said we're going to have to give it a little bit. I said until at least after the new year, because, these things take time. I think that this week's SmackDown was a great example of things starting to change. They promised us a lot. They promised us new matches, new faces, better storylines. They said they were going to listen to the fans. And this SmackDown, you got some of that. A great example, John Cena came back, and while I know he's not a new face, he hasn't been around a little bit, John Cena came back and he was put in a program with Becky Lynch. He came out and he said, hey, John Cena, great to be back. Made fun of himself a lot like he normally does. And then he said, I know SmackDown. Or first he said, you're wondering why I'm back. I know SmackDown. In 30 seconds, somebody's music is going to hit. They're going to walk out here. They're going to tell me that I'm washed up, and we're going to have a match. And I thought that was very telling, and I thought that was a great job by the SmackDown creative team. Because what they did there was they brought John Cena out, and he basically said, I know what this product is. This is what happens every time I come out. I come out, and some guy from the back has an issue with me, and he comes out, and he calls me a part-timer, and then we have a match. This is how it works. Well, instead of that happening, Becky Lynch's music hit, and she came out, and she said, how does it feel? And John Cena's like, oh, how does it feel to be back? It's great. And she's like, no. How does it feel to be standing in the ring with the man? And it was great. It was an example of WWE changing. Becky Lynch is part of the new guard. Becky Lynch is quite possibly the hottest thing in wrestling. And by in wrestling, I don't mean women's wrestling. I mean wrestling in general. WWE, New Japan, Evolve, all those, Ring of Honor. Becky Lynch is probably the hottest thing going on right now. And to put John Cena in a program with her, and by program, of course, I don't mean that them two are going to have a match, but by bringing her out with John Cena, it was a great, almost changing of the guard moment. It was showing you the old SmackDown and then the new SmackDown. But they ended up entering a match with Andrade Cien Almas and Selena Vega. The match itself, it's nothing to write home about, but the things that happened in that match, when John Cena was on the offensive, and the match seemed over, all he needed to do was pin. Becky Lynch came, she threw him out of the ring. Basically said, no, this is my deal. I'm doing this. They won the match, walking up the ramp. John Cena turned around to shake her hand, and she just looked at it, walked right past him. I thought it was great. It was a good time for Becky to be able to advance her character. Characters, her character is what it is, but it was a great time for her to show it more. And speaking of showing more character, of course, the actual SmackDown started with the New Day. We know what the New Day are. The New Day are pretty much a comedy act, and I don't say that in a negative way because what they do is great. And they were able to show a lot of character coming out. Big E dressed like the New Year's baby, it made me laugh. I should come to expect it because that's what they do. But it was great. They came out for the New Day New Year's celebration, and that's how they opened it up. They went over, their New Year's resolutions, which one of them was not eat pancakes, which Big E then dug out of his diaper and started eating and throwing to the crowd anyway. I mean, it was a great moment. It was a good way to start SmackDown. Then you had the John Cena, Becky Lynch stuff. You had Shane McMahon and The Miz. You had them forming their team. It gave a little introspective into what's going on in their life, which basically was The Miz trying to pick out a wrestling uniform, a wrestling, I don't know what you'd call it, but he was trying to pick out their matching wardrobe. And he was showing some mock-ups to Shane. It was more comedy, which we've kind of come to expect from SmackDown. SmackDown is a little bit more lighthearted than Raw, and it was a great way to do it. They got a lot of different people involved. They promoted the 5-way match for the number 1 contender to the new Daniel Bryan's championship. They had a match earlier to determine, number 5, which was actually the first match that happened. But it was the 5-man itself, the actual match was pretty damn good. It was good wrestling. It was entertaining. You didn't really know who was going to win. The number 1 contender match, the last spot, they had a match between Samoa Joe and Jeff Hardy, which Samoa Joe won. It was a pretty good match. It was nothing to write home about, but, it was a good watch. And I think the right person won in Samoa Joe. He moved into the 5-man that featured AJ Styles, Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio, Mustafa Ali. Now, some of those names, AJ Styles you knew was going to be there. Randy Orton, I would pay somebody to have Randy Orton nowhere near the main event picture. Randy Orton, when you talk about changing and you talk about bringing new stuff to SmackDown, Randy Orton is the opposite of that. Randy Orton has the same moveset, the same mannerisms, the same promos, the same ring gear that he's had since the Evolution days. Randy Orton should be nowhere near this, but whatever, he was in the match. You had Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe has shown a lot recently. If you listen to Ben's gone into this in detail. Samoa Joe, number 1, he's a great wrestler. He's a great character, and he has a tendency to bring real-life things into the program. You saw it with his program with AJ Styles, where he brought his wife into it. You saw it with Jeff Hardy, where he brought his past addictions into it. Samoa Joe is a lot of fun to watch, especially on the microphone, and his wrestling is great. Rey Mysterio, I know he's not a new face, but he hasn't been around the WWE in a while. A lot of people are excited to see him. And then you had Mustafa Ali. Mustafa Ali, this was, his 3rd match on SmackDown. So they took Mustafa Ali. His first match was against the world champion. His second match was a tag team match in which he pinned the world champion. And then his 3rd match, he's inserted to become the number 1 contender for an actual title shot. That's saying a lot. Going back to what I said in the beginning, WWE promised us that they're going to bring us new faces. Mustafa Ali is a new face. They said they're going to bring new storylines. This is a new storyline. Mustafa Ali being inserted into these storylines makes them new. It makes them fresh. The match was great. Watch the match. AJ Styles ended up winning, which I know you're thinking AJ Styles versus Daniel Bryan. We've seen this before. But AJ Styles was the man that should have won that match. You can't insert Mustafa Ali, who's still new. I understand you're trying to elevate him, but now is not the time to do it. You have to build him up first. Rey Mysterio, for me, this feels like Rey Mysterio, and I said this with Jeff Hardy too, it feels almost like a retirement tour. It feels like they're bringing him back because this is his home. They're going to let him wrestle for a little bit, let him have his kind of last hurrah in the WWE, before he rides off into the sunset, before they find something else for him to do. I don't think that he's the man that you would want to put in a championship match for one of the big 4 pay-per-views. This, of course, taking place at the Royal Rumble. I wouldn't have minded seeing Samoa Joe win. I thought that would have been something new. But Samoa Joe is a 100% absolute heel, as is the new Daniel Bryan. Going heel on heel for your main event of Royal Rumble, I can't see that working like the WWE would want to work. Now, if this was a match on one of their quote-unquote B pay-per-views, then yeah, sure, go for it. But as far as the Royal Rumble goes, I mean, you have to give the people what they want. The people want AJ Styles. AJ Styles is the biggest face in the industry right now. AJ Styles is probably the best wrestler in the industry right now. And I don't care how many times AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan wrestle. I will watch and I will enjoy every single one. Now, AJ is in the middle of a contract negotiation, which he's trying to get a lighter schedule. He's trying to get a Randy Orton type schedule. So, maybe this is kind of a last hurrah for him too, because you can't have both champions on both brands, kind of part-time talent, which AJ wouldn't be as part-time as Brock Lesnar, but he would work a limited schedule. So maybe this is them giving them their, AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan, their last match together. Their, one more chance to put it all out there for them to show the people what real wrestling looks like. Because make no mistake about it, when these two get in the ring, they tell a story. It is amazing. Every match that they've had. The last one, when Daniel Bryan actually turned heel, that was a story from start to finish. You almost could, going back and watching it, you could see Daniel Bryan kind of transform in front of your eyes. You could see him get more vicious. You could see him get more angry. And then by the very end, there was no doubt that Daniel Bryan was a heel. He came into that match as a face. He left as a heel. There is nothing more that you could really ask. And honestly, for a pre-taped SmackDown, there was nothing really more that I could ask out of it. For this SmackDown, if you read the spoilers, I highly recommend you go back and you watch it. This SmackDown was good. I wouldn't give it an A, but it is definitely worth sitting down and watching. After you do, make sure you go on our website, throwthex.com. Leave us some comments. Let us know what you thought of it. Tell us what your favorite parts of it, the parts that you didn't like. We love having conversations with you guys. If you're not into the whole website thing, of course, we're on Twitter, @TTX Wrestling. Go ahead, follow us, leave us comments there, and we will be more than happy to engage you. And if you have any questions, let us know those too, because we'll, of course, put them on our main show, which will happen this weekend. If you haven't heard Ben Conrad's Raw review that he posted yesterday, make sure you go back and listen to that. It's entertaining, especially considering Ben was actually sick for Monday and Tuesday, and I think he is still on his medication, which if you've ever seen Ben drunk, multiply that by about 2, and that's what you're going to get out of him on medication, so it's always a good listen. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean. You can find us anywhere that you can listen to a podcast. I encourage you to follow us on there, subscribe. You'll get notified anytime anything new comes out. I want to thank you for listening. Can't wait to hear you guys on this weekend when me and Ben return. Everybody, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Throw the Podcast. Join us again next week for even more wrestling commentary.